God is fully aware of my spouse's imperfections, limitations, but he's just as eager for me to love him and be kind and generous in spite of those things as I am to my children.
Hey ladies, welcome back to another episode of Faithful and Flourishing. As you know, we've been talking about a new topic every single month, and for the month of March, we have been talking about marriage. And as I thought about who I could chat with on this particular topic, my friend Deena came to mind. She has been a huge encouragement to me in this area. Just between reading her blog posts and seeing different things that she's posted online, and actually book recommendations. I remember several years ago, she gave me a book recommendation called Cherish that really influenced my marriage. And I remember when my Instagram account was decorating. I know it used to be decorating. I know you can't believe that, but I used to have an Instagram account all about decorating. And one question that I asked my audience back then was, what is home to you? And her response is the only one I remember out of all the people that responded. And she said, I know it might sound cheesy, but home is truly wherever my husband is. And like I said, that just stuck with me all these years. And I knew, you know what, Deena would be the perfect person to interview for a talk about marriage. So today, without further ado, I want to introduce you to Deena. She's a pastor's wife, mother of 6, and she was also my elementary school Awana teacher. Welcome, Deena.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. What a blast from the past. Awanas.
Yep. So I know a lot of listeners may not know who you are. So can you just, in a quick recap, we don't need to take a long time, but can you kind of introduce yourself? What are you doing? Where are you at?
Sure. My husband and I are here at Broadview Heights, Ohio. My husband is a pastor, Broadview Heights Baptist Church. We have 6 kids. We are currently homeschooling 3 of them. So I'm almost done. I told them, don't even come at me with the grandkids. They're yours. Yeah, we're just here in Ohio. We're faithfully serving the Lord, thankful to be a stay-at-home mom. And I love to knit. I love to write. I love to encourage. And that's about it. It's a quick wrap up of me.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I'm really glad that you agreed to do this little chat. I know when I reached out to you about it, you have a couple specific things that you're talking about. You want to talk about cherish, and then you wanted to talk about the 5 love languages. So we are all ears. I'm ready. You go for it. I'm ready to just sit back and listen.
Well, I'm super excited. I think next to talking to ladies about how much God loves them, because that has just been such a growing and learning process for me. Second to that, my favorite thing to talk about is our marriages and how to love our husbands, because that's something I really, really enjoy and I really am passionate about. So I'm very thankful for the opportunity. I'm humbled and thankful. I am not an expert on marriage. I'm growing right with you, with everybody else, and just thankful for the opportunity. So I got to thinking, what were some things that really take our marriage from good to great? Just that tweaking of things to allow us to really fully enjoy our marriages. And the first thing that I wrote down was to remember that each of us married God's child. You know, I have 3 sons that are 18 years old or older, and I am fully aware of their weaknesses or where they're going to drive their future spouses crazy. And it's really, when I think about it, it's scary how desperately I want these boys to be loved. I want my sons to find wives that will honor them and respect and support them really in the midst of their weaknesses. None of my kids are perfect, but they'll always be my kids, which is why I will always love the people that love them. And, you know, it's really no different with our Heavenly Father who loves us. We're his children. Right. And God is fully aware of my spouse's imperfections, limitations, but he's just as eager for me to love him and be kind and generous in spite of those things as I am to my children. So that was just a good reminder for me, very good reminder. And I think that that helps us to start off remembering who they are in God's eyes. Mark
Yeah.
12:30 says, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy mind, and with all thy strength. This is the first commandment.
Mhm.
But the second, namely this, it says, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. There
Mhm.
is none other commandment greater than these. The Bible goes on to say that every other commandment in the Bible hangs on these two things, to
Right.
love God and to love our neighbor. So not only is our spouse God's son, but he's the closest neighbor you have. So it's a great opportunity to put these things into practice. And I love that it says to love God supremely,
Mhm.
because we're going to find that that's the foundation for everything. I loved your last interview that you had with Aaron, talking about just the foundation of God's word. So taking your marriage from good to great, you need to remember that this is God's child. And when
Yeah.
I see my kids, I just want them to be loved in spite of themselves.
Mhm.
And God looks at my husband that way. And he says, here's Joel. And yeah, he's got some quirks. He's got some things he's growing in, just like you do. But I just want you to love him well. Would you just take care of him? Would you just love him for me? So that is something that I've really, that's something that I strive to do and remember. The other thing that I thought about that was super important really comes from a book that you mentioned, which is the Five Languages. So the second point is make sure you and your husband are speaking the same language. The Five Love Languages is a book that I hand out at every bridal shower. I just think it's a terrific explanation of how to love your spouse well. And my husband and I have had the opportunity to minister abroad to a bunch of military couples in Italy. And I remember one afternoon, there was this little corner store, and we thought we were asking at the store for some butter. And we wanted to get eggs and bread, and just so we could make ourselves breakfast that next morning. And sure enough, the next morning we got home and we took out the toaster, we got the skillet, and we realized we had a beautifully golden wrapped chunk of cheese.
Oh.
It wasn't butter, it was cheese. And it can be pretty frustrating when you're in a foreign country and you can't communicate properly. You think you're saying one thing, but you're saying something else. Hopefully it's not something bad. But part of really taking your marriage from good to great is loving your spouse well and knowing how to communicate love to them. So just quickly, the five love languages are acts of service. For these people, actions speak louder than words, right?
Mhm.
Receiving gifts. A gift speaks volumes to them. Quality time, giving your undivided attention. Words of affirmation, using those words to really uphold and lift someone up. And physical touch. Nothing speaks deeper than touch to these folks. Gary Chapman has a quiz online at fivelovelanguages.com to help you learn your spouse's language. But just like you take, 2 years of language in high school, we need to study and learn the language our spouse speaks and speak that to them.
Yeah, and sometimes I think they speak more than one, because I
Yeah.
found that I remember when I read that book several years ago, and trying to figure out both his love languages and my own too. And I'm like, I don't even know what I am, for myself. How am I supposed to figure out somebody else? But yeah, that it's very hard. So that quiz, I think I even took the quiz and I was still baffled. I'm like, well, I don't know. But
You
yes,
know
it's
what?
very
That's
important.
interesting that you said that, because I do believe that there's a primary and a secondary, but I
Mm.
also believe that we change.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think I would say early in my marriage, quality time was huge for me. I stay at home with 6 kids. We were in the ministry, very busy, but I needed that time and I wanted undivided time, that
Yes.
undivided attention. But as things have changed and my children are very much more independent and self-sufficient, my love language has changed. So I don't mind sharing mine if that's not too much of an overshare. But my primary love language is physical touch.
Mm.
Ladies, it's physical touch is my primary love language. And I unashamedly, I'm very thankful for that. I'm thankful for a husband that understands that, and it's a huge need for me. My primary is physical touch, but my secondary is words of affirmation.
Mm.
And I love words. A good word really lifts my soul. So that
Yeah.
is huge to me.
Mm.
And I think a lot of times we grow up in homes and we watch what our mom does and we think, well, I'm going to do the same thing my mom did because
Yeah.
that worked for her and my dad. So that's definitely going to work for me. But that may not be your spouse's love language. So
Yeah.
really encourage people to go to that website, to take the quiz, to seek to understand that. But usually what your spouse does for you is
Mm.
what they appreciate the most.
It's just really interesting that you said, that it does change over, because that makes sense why it would be really hard, but that also, it's not like it's a one and done thing.
Yes.
It's not like, oh, I'm going to learn his love language, in our first 5 years of marriage and we're good to go. You have to be a student of your spouse your whole entire marriage. Wow. Mm.
Absolutely. And I actually have that in my notes that
Oh,
my goal is to get my master's and then my doctorate in loving my spouse well. And
so
my
good.
husband is acts of service. If you have a spouse whose love language is acts of service, you really have it easy. Okay. Because you're going to make the bed anyways. You're going to have dinner on the table. You're
Yes.
hopefully going to have your kids dressed and ready to go and cleaned up from school and ready to go on Sunday morning. And so that's easy to love them. It's
Mhm.
easy to love them. I mean, if I mow the grass for my husband, it speaks volumes to him. If I pay a bill, if I have the laundry put away, I mean, they are super, super easy to love. And we joke because the other day he told me, he said, hey, I pulled out the dryer and I like swept behind it and cleaned it all out. And our joke is very much in jest, but I kind of pat him on the back and I'm like, man, if my love language was acts of service, you'd be hitting it out of the park. We joke
Ah,
about that.
yeah.
So what he'll do for me, if we're not careful and really understanding each other's love language, he'll clean behind the dryer because to him, boy, if she did this for me, this would mean so much to me.
Right.
But I'm sure we've had different instances where that's not exactly the case, how it works out all the time.
Yep.
So knowing their language and speaking it well, speaking it often, finding out what means the most to them, that's been a huge game changer for us in our marriage.
Yeah. Yeah. And like you were saying, you might be talking different languages. And you that's a very, like, I think of marriages where they're not bilingual, but where maybe they both have a different first language and how difficult that's got to be to communicate. And just taking that into um the love languages and thinking about it like that, man, that's got to be, when you're speaking different languages, what a detriment to marriage that can really be. You don't really think of it like that, but if I'm speaking the wrong language to my husband, we're not going to be communicating well at all.
Absolutely. And you love the way that you love because that means something to you. Like if I'm going to bring a gift to someone for their birthday, I'm bringing something that I love.
Right,
I'm
right,
bringing a candle that I love. I'm bringing a scarf I love. I'm bringing the things that I love to them saying, I love it. So obviously you're going to love it too.
right, right.
And that kind of can be very selfish. So sometimes we have to wrap our brain around the fact that this means something to me. It may not mean exactly the same thing to you. What means the most to you and studying them. I love that. I love picking up on things
Mm.
that my husband will mention means something to him. And one of the things that he loves is to have the car washed, going through the car wash. And having that done and vacuuming out the car, just having that done um, because he mentioned it, just those little
Mhm.
things, just like if you mentioned to your spouse, oh, I would love to get flowers for the kitchen. It just would be so lovely. It would just feel like spring in here. And he
Mhm.
picked them up for you. Boy, that's studying you. That's knowing
Yeah.
you and wanting to love you in a very special way. So if he mentions, oh man, these suit pants. I can't believe I got this on these suit pants as a pastor. These are his uniforms. So it means a lot to him if I pick them up and take them to the cleaners and then pick them up from the cleaners and put them in the closet so that they're
Yeah.
ready for him. So
Yeah.
that to me, it's a lot of fun it's so fun and easy to love my spouse. It
Yeah.
really is. And it's really a joy.
And we probably need to move on to the next point, but just when you're talking right there, it reminded me of, I heard some advice that I try to put into practice that has just been really, really helpful. But when your husband mentions something that he wants done, to put it on the top of your to-do list for that day or the next day or whatever it is. And I fail at that. I mean, I'm just thinking recently there were, I usually take shirts to the dry cleaners, and for whatever reason, he was all excited about using that special pen on the collars. The collars get really nasty. And so we got the special pen on the collars. Well, do you know the real reason I take shirts to the dry cleaners is so I don't have to iron them. That's the real reason.
That's smart.
So we have the shirts done, clean, and they were hanging there, and I'm eyeing them, and they're staring at me, and I'm like, I gotta iron you. And he said one time, he was like, why are those shirts still hanging there? And right then I'm like, okay, he said something. I need to have that done. So just talking through, yeah, such a good point. Such a good point.
And it really is fun. When I know what my closest friends love for their birthday, I enjoy. I love that. I mean,
Yeah.
I like to know specific things. I do not like having to pick out things unless they want to end up with the same candles and things that I like. But if you want to tailor a gift, you really have to listen. You really have to seek to understand.
Yeah.
And so that could be a lot of fun. But the third point that I have is to make time to connect every day, every week, and every year. And I get it. Life is crazy. It's crazy good, but it's crazy. And everyone has needs. Your kids have needs, but your marriage has needs as well. And marriage really produces strong spiritual kids. It has to come from your marriage first, which ultimately comes from your walk with God first. Going back to the last conversation that you had, everything comes out of that.
Yes.
So this is the thing that really surprised me, I think, the most in marriage is that you each change into totally different people. I laugh because my girls will see a picture of my husband and they're like, oh, I just want to marry someone just like dad. I'm like, okay, well, dad wasn't always like this. Dad was like that nerd guy that you're looking at, that look at this guy. We're 25 years down the road. We both were nerds. We both have changed, and every job changes you. Every child changes you. You're just not the same people that you were so many years ago. And so you have to keep connecting with this person who is changing. It's not just the wife that changes, it's the husband as well. So you change a lot. And I don't just mean sizes, but that's one way I've changed. So here are 3 things that someone taught us a long time ago. These are not original with me, but someone taught us these things and they've been a huge help. And the first one is a daily delay. Okay. A daily delay. That's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever you could fit in. We used to call this forehead to forehead time of solidarity as parents when my kids are little. But it could be something like sitting on the back porch, sharing the high and the low for the day. We did this just yesterday because, I got to practice what I preach. I got to put these things into practice. And I was laughing at what the high was for my husband. I was amazed. I'm thinking, okay, what's your high and low for the day? And I'm waiting for him to tell me. And his high for the day. Now, it could have been because he knew I was going to be talking to you, Sarah. I'm teasing. But he said the high for the day was coming home and seeing you cooking dinner by the stove. Now, remember, acts of service, okay, goes into that, I'm sure. But that was amazing to me. And I was thinking of like something delicious that I drank, like some iced coffee that I had for the day, But that is a wonderful way to remember we are two totally different people. So a daily delay, it can be anywhere. It could be on the back porch. It could be sitting on the couch. It could be as soon as he comes home from work. It could be after dinner. But just time to look at each other and to connect and to hear about the other person's day. No children allowed. Okay. No children allowed. Just you and your spouse. And this is important. Why? Well, because it's easy to sweep things under the rug that will come back later and be a frustration for both of you. Maybe there's been a misunderstanding. I mean, a lot can happen in one day. If you're busy and with his
Right.
job and your homemaking and ministry, and kids' needs. So it's
Right.
important to have that forehead to forehead talk every day, just to sit down, connect. But the second thing I think that's important is a weekly withdrawal. A weekly withdrawal is, yes, the date nights. A lot of people have talked about that. Some people think they don't need one. I'm going to tell you why I think you do. It could be fancy, it could be cheap, but you got to leave the house. And when I say cheap, when my children were very little, we actually sat in our car in the driveway. So when I'm saying cheap, I'm saying you could go as cheap as you want, but I was not in that house. I wasn't staring at the dishes or
Yeah.
staring at the kids. Now, I will say that the kids actually came out and circled the van so that rearview mirror that says objects in mirror are closer than they appear. Yeah, they actually were closer. They were way too close. But you could go cheap, you could go expensive, you could grab, and we would sit in the van, we would play Uno, we would play Skip-Bo. Just 45 minutes, an hour by ourselves. You could pick up a burger and sit in the park. You could take a walk, grab ice cream. You could go to Lowe's and pick up door handles and grab something on the way home. But what's important is getting out of the house and getting out from being underneath the weight of the responsibility there at home. Now, this is something that I haven't heard except for my husband and I that we did coin, and it's the undate. Okay. There are such things as undates. And an undate is this is what happens when it's been a hot minute since you've connected in any way, shape, or form. Now, listen, we all get there. We all get there tonight. My husband and I are going on a date and we're hoping it's not an undate, okay? Because it's been a while. But an undate is when you've had some responsibilities, you've had some stress, it's prevented you from connecting. You know you need to connect, but I'm telling you right now, go cheap. Go cheap on this meal because nobody wants to have an undate sitting at a fancy restaurant, okay? These aren't the dates that dreams are made of, but they just might be the beginning of a bigger problem if you don't do something, okay? So the undate is just a time to get away, leave the kids with the sitter, and maybe air some things that need to come out, some frustrations or some disappointments. Somebody told us early on in ministry, this was super helpful. One way to not bring baggage home from church Sunday night, because Sunday can be a really long day of ministry, is to go someplace and a coffee shop somewhere and talk it out for like a half hour and leave all of that baggage there so you don't bring it back home. And we've done that before. There are years that were very hard that we would do that. So that's just a little bonus there for any ministry couples. Sometimes you got to do that. But it's important to connect on a weekly basis. And then the last one is called an annual abandon. And this was super difficult when my children were little. I get that. Early ministry, marriage, maybe with finances or with job situation, this can be really difficult early on in marriage. But annual abandons, finding an Airbnb in the city or the mountains to take time and plan maybe throughout the whole year together. This really is the icing on the cake in marriage. We have asked people where they've gone and what they've done, but it's not about going and being tourists. It's really about going and being together.
Right.
And you don't have to conquer your surroundings. Just be together. Take time to unplug, reconnect. And this really is time for maybe some extended Bible reading together, to pray together. Boy, hearing, it's something that I look forward to doing maybe when our life isn't so busy with kids, but, we don't read the Bible together a lot. Just he and I, and just talking it out and talking over things. And we recently were able to do this and slip away. And we just ate up chunks of the Psalms, and it was such a balm. And he would read some and I would just be sobbing just for the preciousness of it. And just to hear him speak that truth to me, it was such a blessing. So I promise that if you do go away, your children will survive and you will thrive. And I've offered to watch people's kids. I've tried to make this possible for different friends of mine. But it is such an encouragement. And I want to give you an example of why this is important. It kind of just wraps everything up.
Yeah.
But for our 15th anniversary, we decided to take a trip to Mexico. A friend of mine had gone there for her honeymoon and gave me all the details. And we planned everything. We did TripAdvisor. We looked up different places to eat and where to rent bikes. And we spent so much time just researching and getting excited about this trip.
Mm.
And the plane landed, we got off the plane, and I was ready for something really out of the Hallmark Channel to just take place right before my eyes. I was ready. And amazing thing happened. I wanted to talk about every single thing I had stored up in the last 15 years. As ladies, we could do that. I was ready to talk about all the things. And my husband started videoing every rock, every seagull, every wave. He started videoing everything with detailed explanations on this video camera for the kids. Okay. It was not a good moment for us. Okay. But what it did was it helped us to realize that really we had just been doing good things. We were serving in a church. We were serving our children. We were faithful to each other. We were faithful to the Lord. But by default, we just kind of grew apart. Doing great things. Yeah. I mean, doing great things. We had grown apart, but drifting did happen. It happens slowly, but it does happen. And if we're not careful, we kind of become business partners, you know? Okay, you pick up the kids, let's go to church. I'll be home for dinner. You're working together, but that intimacy was lost. And really that friendship, building that friendship was lost. And it was not a super fun trip. So we actually, a couple years later, we went back and we redeemed Mexico for us. It was the undate vacation, that first one, but it took us sitting down and, what's important to you again? And what are you afraid of? And where do you see us in 5 years? And I think that is why getting away is super, super, super important. And I think what we thought was this one trip is just going to fix everything. And the one trip really showed us our Achilles heel. It showed us where maybe some friends of ours have stumbled and now are no longer together because they didn't take care of these little things, the little foxes that spoil the vines.
Right.
Yes.
And I've heard it said a lot too from the pulpit. I know my brother-in-law, our pastor, says this all the time, but when a lot of times children are what keep couples together, and they're, yes, we're taking care of the kids. And then when they're empty nesters, then after all these years of marriage, they get a divorce because they are not connected anymore. Like the kids were what were holding them together. And then afterwards it was like, wow, we are completely different people. We haven't stayed connected all these years. Who are you? I don't want to live with you anymore. Whereas, so yes, that I do see where that is really important.
That's where that daily delay really comes in. Because if you're just sitting down for 5 minutes and just sharing a burden on your heart or a blessing or a worry or a concern or just gratitude for the other person. Hey, how was work? Thanks for going to work. Thanks for coming home every day. Thanks for enjoying dinner with me every day. Thanks for just putting up with me. When you do that, it makes those annual abandons so much more precious. Us just going away a month ago, it was so much more special because we fought to stay connected. And this is going to sound super sciencey of me. I am not sciencey, but this was so interesting because it says the second law of thermodynamics says isolated systems tend towards greater disorder, and entropy is a measure of that disorder. Essentially, any system which is a closed system will always move away from order and towards disorder. So, I mean, everything in nature tells us that, like, if you don't take care of something, if you don't tend to it, it's going to pull apart. And if isolated system, that's so interesting to me because that's where that business partner comes in. You can be working together, but not be together. And that's where I think many marriages that I've seen, even in my life, they don't have that connection through the years, but then they think a cruise for their 30th anniversary, that's just it's gonna pull them back together. It's gonna spark all this intimacy and this joy and friendship. And, I praise the Lord if that does happen, but I don't think that that's how God planned it.
Right. So good. That was so good. The science illustration. Wow.
Right?
I never applied that to marriage before, but it's so true.
When I saw that, I was like, that's exactly what I mean. To become business partners like that. And you do become isolated. And, if you don't have a connection and then there's a frustration, there's a disappointment. I mean, we live with sinful people. We are sinful. We're two sinners that just need heaps of forgiveness and grace. Then if there's something in it that the devil could get a hold of, it causes more and more and more isolation until there's bitterness and resentment. And I'd much rather cut that off at the beginning than allow that to fester so that I have to figure that out 5-10 years down the road. So
yeah. Wow, that was good. Do you have any more points, or was that your?
that is it. I had 3 points. I didn't want to bore you.
Oh my goodness, it's not a bore.
But,
So I'm just sitting here waiting for point 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
I appreciate that. These are
right,
just the things that are on my heart. Yes.
Yes. Well, so good. I thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And there were several things that I am going to be taking away and thinking about later. But if you're up for it, I have some questions for you.
Absolutely.
Okay. So these were submitted by a few people on Instagram. So the first one, what are some ways you serve and communicate love to your husband? Now, I feel like we've talked about this a little bit, but if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I do think that, boy, that really hits a lot of those love languages. Communicating love, really, again, paying attention. How are they loving me? How are they reaching out to me? That's usually a key to understand the way that they really will respond to love the most, and it will mean the most to them. I could give my husband gifts and he appreciates them, but he really appreciates it when I unload the dishwasher. Okay, that's my husband. I may not be your husband, but again, all those things are a blessing, but the Lord really gives us wisdom to know how to love them when we study them. And again, that quiz might help that person head in the right direction.
Yeah. And to pray for that wisdom too. Pray, Lord, open my eyes to see who my husband is.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So I know, because like we mentioned before, it is hard. Sometimes it's, I'm just sitting here thinking as you're talking, what does my husband do? What does he do? Because if you look at it from that angle, that might help. Like, what does he do for me? And
absolutely. Absolutely. And ask him, just you could ask your husband, I really want to love you well. And it's just been a goal of mine. And how can I show you that love and appreciation? What is something that would really mean a lot to you, or something I could do on a consistent basis that would mean something to you? So, I mean, when all else fails, just ask your husband.
Yeah.
How can I communicate love to you? I mean, what husband isn't going to love a wife that says, "Hey, I got pen and paper. How can I communicate love to you?"
Right.
So, yeah.
It reminds me a little bit, the 5 love languages. It reminds me a little bit of the book that I've talked about this month, His Needs, Her Needs. A little bit different angle, but same idea, like learning your spouse, learning what his particular needs are, because there might be some main ones that kind of cover everybody in general, but your husband's specific, like top need or top 2 needs, is going to be different. So, yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
How do you deal with your husband's weaknesses, and how do you show him grace?
Great question. I guess my heart answer would be, God has given us so much grace for the taking. And I believe that when that frustration comes, it's usually because I haven't accessed that grace. He has a storehouse of grace at salvation. He's had a storehouse of grace for me.
Yeah.
And I could make a withdrawal whenever I need to. So I think remembering that there is grace for the taking if there's something that is a weakness or a challenge or a frustration for me. And if I get to the point of frustration, I have not accessed that. And also understanding that I need that so much for myself. I fall short so many times, and I have so many quirks and weaknesses and weird things. I have so many weird things that I'm grateful. I think also being grateful for the fact that he chooses to live with me, and the fact that I don't put my shoes away and I lose my phone a million times a day, and usually find it when it's dead and then we can't locate it. So many different things. I think walking circumspectly helps me to really give grace in that area. That sounds super spiritual, and I don't mean it for that to sound that way, but um yeah.
I
Yeah.
think it goes a lot with your first point too, where you mentioned he's God's child. Um, and God has called us to love him even through quirks and weaknesses, and praying for God to give us that love, give us his love.
Yes.
Um, because yeah, you know, I'm wicked and annoying, like you mentioned. I'm wicked and annoying and cause all kinds of problems too. So maybe going to him and being like, how do you have grace for me? Maybe I could learn from you. But yeah, we're all just sinners just trying to get through life, but we're all going, as long as we're both saved, you know, we're all going in the same direction. And like you mentioned, the grace, understanding the grace of our Lord.
Mhm.
um so good, especially as we're coming up on Easter weekend, man. Just thinking of all that grace that he has bestowed on us. I'm so thankful.
And that it's there for the taking. We
Yes.
need to access it. Um, so beginning the day, saying, God, there are going to be things that are going to frustrate me, or in the moment over the
Mm,
dishes. Lord, I'm so frustrated with this particular thing, or this is getting on my nerves, and just asking for grace through that. But what's interesting is that, and again, I'm only 25 years down the road, but loving each other well and having such a good friendship, your closest friend doesn't drive you crazy. They have their
mm.
foibles and their shortcomings, but that never drives you crazy. Why? Because they're your friend. You love them. You love
Right,
being with
right.
them. And I think that changes, and of course, other stresses can come into that. If you're
Mm,
going through a period of stress, boy, you need to access more grace.
yeah.
You're going to be seeing things that the devil wants you to see,
Right,
and get
right.
caught up on. So, yeah.
Mm. Well, speaking of friendship, that's a good segue into the next question. How can I cultivate a friendship with my husband? I feel
Well,
like
the
we've
Bible.
talked about all these.
Well, that's good. It's good to
Yeah,
review.
yeah.
But the Bible says, a man that hath friends must show himself friendly.
So
And we
good.
can be the least friendly with our husbands, our
Mm,
neighbor, our closest neighbor. I could bake my neighbor a
yeah.
pie and not want to be friendly with my husband. Because that's just, we're sinful that way and we're so
Mhm.
selfish. But am I showing myself to be friendly, a friendly companion? Do I listen? Do I want to spend time with them? And I think every friendship is cultivated through time. I don't have any friend that I've only known a week and we're the closest friends, right? My friends
Right.
are years and years and years in the making, with tears and laughs and jokes and precious time spent together and hardship. So I
Mhm.
think TIME, spending time together with them, all kinds of things.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think too, I think sometimes we make it hard on ourselves. Spending time can be so easy, and I have a friend in my life who has been a huge influence on me in this area because um just watching how she interacts with her husband, and she'll go out and hand him tools or whatever while he's working on something. She does that not because she knows how to fix whatever it is that they're fixing. She does that to be with him. And notice that the husband, he's not the one that's searching her out. He's going on with his business, but she's spending time with him and showing him love that way. And I think it's so easy. One thing that I think of all the time is my husband takes our dog for a walk every night. And in the winter, I've been terrible about joining him. But in my mind, I know that is a free date. I can literally throw on my gym shoes and go on a walk with him, just the two of us. And what a blessing that is to have those few minutes together.
Yes.
And it's not, we make it so difficult. And it doesn't have to be difficult. It can be so simple. Hey, can I run with you to the store? Hey, you're going to pick something up. Can I go with you? Or, just something like that. Yeah, I feel like that is something that I can definitely grow in, just in intentionality. I think that's one word that always comes to mind with this kind of stuff. It's so, going back to your science thing, if you don't try, if you're
Mhm.
not intentional, you're going to drift apart. So if you want to take your marriage from good to great, you've got to be intentional about these things.
Absolutely. I laughed because an illustration I've used before to some sweet ladies that I was able to talk to was the illustration of a Japanese orchid. I do not have a green thumb. I have a fiddle leaf fig that has survived despite me trying to kill it at least 8 times. I overwater it. I don't give it enough sun. It's actually grown mold before. I'm telling you, I don't have a green thumb.
Well, that's amazing that you still have it, because fiddle
I
leaf
know.
figs are hard. They're
That's
hard.
what I've heard. That's what's so funny, which it's I get this false sense of security that I can grow things because this poor thing is just hardy. Okay.
Yeah.
But Japanese orchids, I mean, they have to have a certain level of humidity. They, they're the ones that you just put like half an ice cube on, they need they're so needy. Japanese orchids are so needy. And so I don't have any of them. That's not the kind of thing I can grow. But if that's cherishing though, when we tell our spouses that we're going to love, honor, and cherish them.
Mm.
Now, if love and cherish were the same thing, we wouldn't use it in that sentence in our vows.
Right.
But cherishing is that tending and taking care of that friendship and fostering that, like you said. I mean, they even sell electric blankets for these orchids. Can you even imagine? Can you imagine? But that's some love. That's some cherishing. And so I think that goes into friendship as well, that just making the time to want to be with them and to enjoy being with them. And
yeah. Okay, here's a little one that's maybe a little more difficult. How do I approach my husband about issues in our marriage? And the specific example they gave was tithing, but I think we could probably apply this to any sort of thing that maybe I don't agree with, or something that's a frustration. How do I approach him about this? And respectfully too.
I am super glad that somebody asked this, because I think that for a long time, there was this feeling that, you can't approach your spouse about anything, you just do your work and just pray. And well, that's not becoming one flesh. That's not working together. And so, I appreciate this question. And I guess what I would say to that is, a lot depends upon our spirit and timing. I don't know about you, but after dinner, this is not the time to ask me a difficult question. I have made it through the day. I have survived.
Yes.
Start up tomorrow morning, we will tackle the difficult things.
Yes.
But after dinner is not. So timing is really important. Are you going through a stressful season? When you're taking a walk and you don't have a care in the world, that'd be a great time to discuss something. This is really on my heart. But also, what is your spirit in it? Is your spirit humble? Are you wanting to really encourage, to grow together and to see the Lord meet this need and work through this difficult situation? And really asking with a heart to want to know or want to understand where they're coming from. So I think timing is huge. And I really think the spirit of the matter. What is your spirit in that? And it's really easy to exalt ourselves and come to our spouse with our own understanding and pride, feeling either judgmental or that we have everything all together. And that's not the spirit that I think the Lord would have us to come to our husbands and speak to them about something that is disturbing or hurtful or hard.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, how can I go from nagging to encouraging my husband?
I think, again, this hits at the fact that you can ask your husband questions. You could ask him difficult questions. You could talk about difficult things. You could talk about difficult things often. This is your closest friend. This is your closest neighbor. This is your spouse. This is the person you love with every ounce of you. So I think that, again, it's okay to ask. It's okay to be intentional about asking about something and needing to hear from them or needing help from them. But again, what is your spirit in the matter? So it sounds like the same answer. It kind of is, but what's your timing? Is this the appropriate time to ask? Ask the Lord for wisdom in that he would just direct you. But also, a lot can be settled and taken care of if we really are walking in the Spirit, if we're really submitted to the Holy Spirit. Holy Spirit, you show me when is the best time and how do I approach this? It's okay to ask and ask and ask again.
Right.
We're friends, we're growing together, we're raising kids, we're working in ministry. It's okay if something hasn't been taken care of to bring that up again. And
Right.
it should be a safe place to do that.
Yeah. Oh, that is so good. You're a safe place, and knowing that you're both going the same direction. You're both on the same team. It's not going back to the previous question too. A lot of times if we disagree with something as far as our spirit, we'll come to him to ask him about something, and our attitude is we are against each other. And it's like, wait a second, no, we are on the same team. So
Yes.
let's find a solution. And I think this nagging and encouraging, as I was thinking more about this question, I completely understand where she's coming from. Like, let's say that I want my husband to stop putting his clothes on the bathroom floor. So I feel like the question is, like, I feel like I'm nagging him all the time about picking up his clothes. How can I encourage him to pick up his clothes? So I feel like same thing. It comes back down to your spirit. It's not a big deal to pick up the clothes, honestly, So would you have any more
Well,
words
that's
to
good.
add to that?
I don't think we're ever going to humble ourselves enough, to be honest with you. I'm never going to humble
Yeah.
myself enough in the day. So bringing in a side of humility to pick up the clothes and put them in the hamper, there's nothing wrong with that. And also there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, I really appreciate it if you would do this. And
Right.
I do want to add to not be discouraged if you come up against some defensiveness. I mean, we're both two fleshly people, and that doesn't mean your husband's always going to be in the right spirit or frame of mind if there is something that needs to be taken care of or something that needs to be talked about.
Yeah.
So don't take that, if there is defensiveness, don't take that as I can never ask him anything. Let the Lord work on his heart.
Yeah.
And but a lot of times I think we take forgetfulness as some kind, we think it's some kind of maliciousness.
Yes.
I've asked him 3 times to do this. Well, I've lost my phone 8 times today. We take forgetfulness and we make it something, we attribute something to it that a lot of times isn't there. But
Right.
again, those daily delays, 5 minutes and saying, well, what is your high and low? Well, your low was the socks on the bathroom floor again, if we're just being honest. Oh, I forgot about that. I needed that reminder. I appreciate that. I'm going to work on that.
Yeah.
I think that's just part of growing together and part of friendship.
Yeah. And I think as women, we create these reels in our mind about or tapes, or I don't know what you want, but just like this we play this over a movie over and over in our mind about how our husband is. And like you were saying, well, he just forgot. It's not like he was, but in our minds, we can work up this huge story. And of course they're gone all day. And here we are at home all day, and we're getting all worked up, and he comes in the house in the door, and we're like, oh, I'm not going to say hi to him. I'm mad at him right now.
Yeah, we're stewing on it, right? I
Yes.
remember my husband, I made something for him. It was, I don't know, a cake. It was something I made, and I mean, it was painstaking to make it. And I worked really hard on it, and he was thankful for it. But I will never forget this. This was just an epiphany. He said to me, thank you for making this for me. But instead of giving things to me, I would love it if you would always think well of me.
Huh.
That was huge to me.
Yeah.
Because I made this cake honestly in my flesh, thinking I'm going to do something for him that'll help me not be frustrated with him. Because I'm taking that energy and I'm putting that towards doing something lovely for him.
Yeah.
And he's going to be excited, and that's going to take this all away. But in reality, what he wanted more was for me to think well of him. And love doesn't think evil, and it gives grace. And it bears, a lot. It suffers long. So I love that. And I've thought of that often, that a gift is lovely, but really thinking best of them is a greater gift.
Yeah. Yeah. That we did that 1 Corinthians 13 study, and where it talks about beareth all things.
Believeth all things. Yeah.
Yes, but I was so fascinated with when we studied the word beareth, that the Greek is it means to cover, to put a covering over, and basically protect their reputation is kind of like the fallout meaning. And I think it's so easy. Like we even have to protect their reputation to ourselves. Like, and I
Yeah.
think that was something that was such a light bulb moment, because I think often I feel like I have to protect his reputation out and about. Like I'm not going to go out and say rude things about my husband, but I have to protect his reputation to myself in my mind when I want to be thinking all these things like, oh, he's doing that on purpose or he's doing that out of spite. No, I need to protect him. No, he's not like that. I know he's not like that. So, anyways, yeah. So, oh my goodness, we could go on for hours and
You
hours.
really could. That's so good because we know how poorly we think of ourselves. We
Right.
know how poorly the tape is playing in our mind and how hard it is for us to just get rid of the lies and speak truth to ourselves, let alone speak truth to ourselves about our spouse. And
Yeah.
I love that it says, believeth all things. My husband and
Mm.
I actually memorized 1 Corinthians 13 when we were apart for a year before we got married. I was finishing up school. And I love that part. Believeth all things. You believe that God is going to use your spouse. You believe that your spouse can do whatever he sets his mind to. You believe that he can lead your home and, encourage people for the Lord, believes all things. And I think part of the reason I love our marriage so much is because way, way back when my husband began believing all things for me.
Mm.
He began believing all things for me. And that's been such a blessing.
Mm. I know 1 Corinthians 13 is so good because I just went through in February. I always think through it in the terms of motherhood, but you can apply it in so many ways. You can apply it to marriage. You can apply it to people in your church, your friends. It's so, so good. Okay, one more question. We got to end with this, but we saved the best for last.
All right.
So I have gotten many good book recommendations from you. And like I mentioned the one Cherish from years ago that you mentioned that had such an impact. Can you share some other books that you absolutely love that would really convict, make us think about our marriages? And again, going from okay, pretty good to amazing.
Good question. I just happen to have a stack right beside me. Gary Thomas and Gary Chapman are my go-tos. I feel like they're practical, they're helpful, they're exciting, they're funny. I've heard both of them speak, and I really, really enjoy them. So, a book that has really, and a lot of the things we talked about today come out of this book is A Lifelong Love by Gary Thomas. Excellent, excellent, excellent book. Again, these are things we know, but being refreshed and hearing them in a different light. This talks a lot about just loving God's child because he loves them and wants them to be loved well. Excellent. Sacred Marriage. This was really, really an eye opener for me because this book is all about what if marriage isn't to make you happy, but it's to make you holy. It's to make you more like Christ. So put your seatbelt on for this one, but super, super good. The other book I have is The Marriage You've Always Wanted by Gary Chapman, also the man who wrote Five Love Languages. I do not have that because I gave my copy away, my last copy away. But excellent, excellent books. Another book that I really love that I am really enjoying is by Francis Chan, and it is entitled You and Me for Eternity. And it's not talking about marriage in heaven, but it's talking about preparing your spouse for heaven. And really seeing your marriage, the bigger picture of your marriage, instead of becoming so focused on your marriage. This is just the source of happiness, and this is our own little bubble. What does God design for your marriage? So it's excellent, excellent book.
Yeah. Man, I can't wait. I actually haven't read. I think I'm pretty sure I own Sacred Marriage. I don't think I actually read it, but I have not read any of those other books, so I'm excited to add those to my list. That's going to be exciting. I told you beforehand, my reading has been slow. My personal reading, my homeschool reading has been, on fire, but my personal reading has been slow and steady. So that will be good to add. Well, actually, my list is getting longer and longer because the slower I am reading books, you know how it
Oh, I'm
goes.
with you.
So, anyways, okay. Well, man, this has been so good. But before we go, can you please tell people where they can find you? Because I know that you have something special that a lot of people don't know about. At least I'm pretty sure a lot of my followers don't know about. So, or my friends, my Instagram people.
Sure. I'm very thankful for the opportunity. I have a blog for Valentine's Day, which is the best holiday. If you know me, it's the best holiday ever.
Yep. Every Friday, right?
Yes,
Every
in
Friday.
February. But my husband, he purchased a domain name for me. So DeenaRoyalty.com is where you can find me. I try to post there often, unless my kids are home from college. Okay, that sets me back a little bit. But I try to get out every Thursday to a little coffee shop and connect with ladies. And to really, my whole goal is just to encourage ladies that they are not alone. That I probably am the worst case scenario in lots of things. So come and laugh and be encouraged and know how very, very loved and pursued you are by God. That really is my goal. So I hope that I can find some new friends that'll come and be encouraged at DeenaRoyalty.com.
Yes, that it is really good. And I mentioned this before, but I always look forward to the notifications on Facebook that, or I guess it's a post on Facebook that says, you wrote a new post. I'm like, oh, yay, I get to go read another one. So yes, it's very encouraging.
Subscribe, it could go right to your email. So
oh yeah, there you go.
Little thing at the bottom. So
yeah. So anyways, I want to encourage people to go over there because it has been a blessing and a lot of laughs. If you know Deena, and you probably heard, but she's funny. So she's always enjoyable to talk with. You'll get a laugh. So thank you so much, Deena. I really do appreciate it. I know you're busy. We were talking about your last couple of months have been crazy and your kids went back home from college, yesterday?
Yesterday.
So it's just, you've had a full life. So I really appreciate you taking the time. It was supposed to be an hour. It's gone a little longer than that, but I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
I'm super, super just humbled and grateful to be here. It's been so much fun chatting. And my prayer is that the truths that we talked about today would just encourage many marriages. It's totally worth it. It's the best, hardest job out there and with so many benefits. I'm so grateful that God designed marriage to be what it is. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, thank you.